clap, done. How do I start this video? Okay, first, let me say, this video is a review of Bleach. And if you want your own manga to be reviewed, not your own manga, but if you want your favorite manga to be reviewed by me, all you have to do is drop a super thanks down below and you will get that review in like a month or two. It took me a while. I wanted to really get into Bleach, so when I got this review given to me, I finished the first box set, and I did not even touch the second box set. I asked him, do you want me to read the second box set? He said, absolutely, read the second box set, so I did. It took me a little bit, and I got a couple more manga I have to do before I can get to yours, but if you want any review down below, just let me know, and you just have to give me like the lowest amount, was like $2, and I will give it to you. Now, let's talk about Bleach. Excuse me. Bleach is one of those manga that are very weird to me. Not like the actual manga is weird. It's not. It is like, well, you know, this is obviously because it was a product of its time, and it definitely paved the way for a lot of other shonen action manga. It's not very out of the wall. What's the term for it? Out of the box. It's not super creative if you look at the new stuff coming out now, which obviously that's gonna come with time. That just happens because of time. Like, stuff is just gonna be innovated on more and more and more. But what it lacks in creativity, it makes up for in so many other things I want to express in this video. Let's get to the pros of Bleach. One, what I want to say about what Bleach does well, definitely the best I've ever seen in a lot of manga, it's absolute swagger. I know that doesn't seem like a giant positive among like these big words and big concepts like character writing and themes and contextualization, but I think a lot of people overlook how important stuff like charisma, swagger, and just overall style and atmosphere a manga can have, and how much that can bring it up higher, and how much more enjoyable a manga can be. If you look at a manga, like a basic, like, you know, shonen manga that has a really just basic art style that just seems kind of boring, it's really hard to get invested in those characters when your art style is so plain. But what Bleach does very well is it has this really scratchy and almost grungy, I would say, but also super stylized art style that is really pleasing to the eye, I would say, at least in my opinion. Just looking at some of these panels, it just feels how cool some of this stuff is. Certain characters, their facial expressions seem so snarky and so smug, and it just feels so cool. Like, I legit feel like I'm back like in school, 15, 16 years old, just feeling how just edgy this is. Not edgy in like the cringe edgy of like oh, the darkness inside me is I have two wolves inside my heart. Not that shit, but more an edgy of like a skater boy edgy, if that makes sense. I know it doesn't, but it's definitely something that needs to be praised about Bleach. It does it very well, especially later on in the manga, his transformations. Now, I'm going to try not to spoil Bleach too much, but I'm going to mention stuff later in the manga. I'm not going to spoil it. I'm not going to outright spoil it, but I will say some transformations later in the manga just get so cool and badass, you just can't help but get excited and feel that adrenaline rush while reading it. Next thing I want to touch upon that also goes with this style, this motif that Bleach has, is the art. The art is incredible. Like, even in like volume 1 and these early volumes where the art is very rough and not in the good way, it still is really dynamic and really cool. Like, a lot of these like camera angles that they use are very dynamic. You'll get top heavy shots where top heavy shots, you know what I mean, where shots are looked from above or shots are looked from below, and it's really hard to draw those, And the author, Tite Kubo, puts a lot of detail in those small little panels. And it just makes the action and it makes the talking scenes way more cool. Like, even look at like a panel like this. Just this panel right here. It's so cool how your eyes just follow this line right here, as well as this blocking scene right there. And the action is so precise and so smooth and natural. It just makes it look so much better. It definitely adds to the atmosphere and just this overall sense of rush that this manga portrays. It works really, really well. Just on like a formulaic manga, just as a manga, it's done incredibly. A lot of stuff like that, and especially in later volumes, I don't want to show it, but Ichigo has a fight against like the number 4 of a group or whatever. It's so good. It's so dynamic, so fluid. There's a million explosions and I can hear every single one of them in my head. It's just so cool and it's just so flowing. I can't even express how well the author is able to create movement in such a limiting media like manga. It's almost like when you read a book and you're just surprised how well the author is able to describe something. It's so interesting the way this manga is able to do that. And another thing that I love about Bleach is, one, its character designs. Its character designs are incredible. That also goes with style and everything like that. But each character has a design that expresses who they are, and it is just really portrayed great. There's no character that I think looks normal or basic. Each character design is handled with a lot of care, and I think they all look great. And let's get into the other stuff that really matters. All this stuff matters, but let's get to the stuff that I really enjoy. Like, I already talked about the fight scenes, but also just the villains, like the amount of villains. I'm going to get into them later because I also have some negatives with them, but the villains are incredible as well. There's a big twist at the end of the end of box set 1 that I think most people know, but I'm not going to say it anyway, that is really, really well handled, and I actually really like it. I'm going to talk about it later, but in my negative section, don't worry, I still love Bleach, but that I think is handled really well at that moment. I also want to touch upon the character arcs that are expressed. I think the character arcs for a lot of the characters are very natural. Now, I do think a lot of characters kind of stay in the same place that they are over the 2 box sets. First box set, I think every single character has a great character arc. It makes sense for their character. It's natural. It's just well written. There's payoffs. It's very satisfying to see those payoffs. They're done very well. And then I think in the second box set, I think the author just caught up with too many characters, and you can't really do a lot with that. Excuse me, I'm very sick. And and I just believe that the author got caught up with too many characters, and it's just hard to give every single character a character arc. There's a lot of characters like Uryu, I believe his name is Uryu, the Quincy guy, Chad, Renji, I think kind of just stay in the same place. Now there are also a lot of other characters like Orihime, Ichigo, Rukia that I think do change over a course of time, and I think do get better. I'm going to talk about Orihime too because I really love her character arc in box set 2. And I just think the overall just cast of characters is really well implemented. They have a lot of chemistry with each other. I love relationships like Ichigo and Rukia. I think they're great friends. Ichigo and Chad are incredible. They're all just so fun to read about. They're just so fun to witness. And they have good banter, which makes it a lot more enjoyable. Another thing I want to touch upon is in box set 1. I think most of the positives come from box set 1, which is like the Soul Society arc. The Soul Society arc is incredible. It's one of the best arcs I've ever read, like in my entire life, probably, just in manga. It's actually portrayed perfectly. There are a couple issues I have with it, which I'll get into later, but a lot of the stuff is essentially perfect. Ichigo's arc on him feeling absolutely worthless and so powerless to him becoming the savior for his best friend and the person that saved him, incredible. Rukia's arc about dealing with the idea that she's about to die and her grappling with her own humanity. Incredible. Chad, what did Chad do? I don't know. I'm gonna get into that. Well, he did do a lot of stuff. Like, I'm not gonna pretend he didn't. But characters like Renji or Byakuya seeming one note at first, but getting these really well-developed character arcs and, well, maybe not character arcs, but character explanations, and seeing their character grow through time just in the Soul Society, I think is incredible. I also think these anti-hero that are portrayed as antagonists to Ichigo are incredible because you know that they're heroes. They fight hollows, they do good deeds. Like, on paper they do good deeds, but they're doing something that is in line and directly against our main character, so they have to fight. So they're portrayed as, you know, bad people. So when they get redeemed, it's seen as realistic. I think it's portrayed really, really well. I gotta see this guy's name. I think his name's Urzu. Uryu's arc about dealing with people and helping people that he thought of as evil for his entire life is incredible. Even look at the backstories. A lot of the backstories are so good. They're really short, but oh my god, did they have me crying so much. Like, I don't even want to talk about it, but Kenpachi, Jesus Christ, like, why? This shit was sad as hell. Almost all the captains get character arcs, and they're all incredible. Every captain and even assistant captain have great designs, great characterization. They all seem interesting, and they're just really, really great supporting characters, and they just help the plot so much. Like, low-key, some of my favorite characters are ones that barely had any dialogue and just had so much coolness and so much aura, just the flowing throughout their entire body. I just couldn't help but enjoy their presence. And I think that's what Bleach does so very well, is just this character idea of all these cool, powerful captains, the pillars, if you will, just being present, as well as our main characters that create this really natural underdog story as well. Now, while that is all true, and I think Bleach does that incredibly, it's honestly might be in my top 20 favorite manga of all time. And I've read like 180 different manga, like a manga series. I've read like so many. As you can tell from the damn wall, I've read a lot. This is definitely top 20, top 30, easily. I will say though, I have some negatives. And this isn't a big list, but there are a couple things I don't really like. One, I think it's pretty obvious. I think Ichigo's just development in power, like actual power, is just really misplaced. Like, he learns a skill that's supposed to take 10 years for like a talented person, and he does it in like 3 days. He like does so many feats where in later battles, it almost feels like there's zero stakes. Almost. There's not zero stakes, but it almost feels like there's zero stakes. As well, in certain fights, especially when you know there's a big bad we have to face in certain fights, there's like no stakes because you know Ichigo's gonna win. I think the best way to go through those fights is to make you sympathize with the main villain that they're fighting. Let's say we know as a reader, the main character has to face the A1 or villain 1, right? We know the main character has to face villain 1 by the end of the arc. That's the goal. It's that they've set up this entire battle. They have to win. And let's say our main character goes against villain 2 and villain 3, you know, in 2 separate battles. How do you make those fights interesting when it's painfully obvious that you've shown your reader main character needs to fight villain 1? How do you make those 2 fights interesting? In my opinion, the best way to go is to make those 2 fights, their villains, sympathetic. Make it seem like you don't want those villains to lose. I'm gonna mention it because I have to mention it in every freaking video. Haikyuu does that very well. Even though it's a volleyball manga, you know, like, the main characters have to go to the next stage. You have to face his next team. So you make, these filler teams very sympathetic. You make them interesting. You give their characters character arcs. Very short ones, very minor ones, but you give them character arcs. You make them interesting. You make it emotional, and you make it actually feel like they lost rather than our team won. You put that more prevalent in the story. So it's sadder when they lose. You don't want them to lose, but they have to because the main characters have to go forward. That's, in my opinion, the best way to do those kind of battles / fights / whatever. Bleach does not do that. It pretends that these fights have ultra mega stakes. I'm going to just spoil it now. Click off if you haven't read Bleach, because Bleach is incredible. I'm going to just spoil it now. Ichigo versus Grimmjow, in my opinion, 0 stakes. Like, I knew he had to face Ukihara, or whatever the fuck his name is. It was like literal 0 stakes with Ichigo versus Grimmjow. I love that fight. That fight is incredible. I love the themes placed around it. But I actually didn't feel anything reading it. I'm going to be honest. I didn't feel any sense of stakes, any suspense while reading that fight. Ukihara, I felt suspense. That fight was probably my favorite fight in this manga. Maybe besides Ichigo versus Kenpachi. But other than that, there's just not a lot. Oh, excuse me. Another negative I have with Bleach is just, like I said, in box set 2, I think box set 2 is incredible, by the way, but in box set 2, it does take a little bit lower in just quality, in my opinion. There's a lot of moments that just feel out of place. The pacing is a lot worse, considerably worse. I think Soul Society was paced perfectly. Every single moment had me at the edge of my seat. I was so invested every single second of every single panel, every single page. I was invested. Box set 2, or what is it called? Hueco Mundo, Arrancar, whatever. That it was just so boring at sometimes. There were full volumes I had to struggle to get through. And I think that's because there are a lot of fights where it's oh, look at this side character that we implemented. We're going to put him as a main character. And we're going to make him face this Arrancar we've never met, we've never seen, and has a okay design. And they're going to fight for, 6 chapters. 6 chapters isn't a lot, but when it's happening and you do that 3-4 times, I don't really care anymore. I think a lot of those characters were cool because they were side characters. One of my favorite characters, I even forgot his name, but he's the traditional Japanese dude with the string hat. I don't even know what you would call a bamboo hat. He was old dude who drank sake all the time. I loved his design. I fucking loved that guy. But that was based off his design alone. But if you go in depth with him and try to flesh him out, I don't really care that much if you put him in that front place. He's not that interesting to me anymore. Now, obviously, that does help with a lot of characters. If Renji or Kenpachi or Byakuya stayed that way as just these supporting characters, they obviously wouldn't be as good. But there's a fine line, and Bleach definitely crossed it, in my opinion. This is all just my opinion, by the way. I also will say the ending of box set 2 was a little predictable. Maybe it's just because I knew a certain character would have survived just based off how much the fandom talks about him. But I know. I just know. And honestly, I don't even consider Aizen that good of a protagonist. I loved him in box set 1. I thought that twist was incredible. But he's just one of those characters now where it's just all coming to my plan without ever explaining shit. I just don't care. I hate characters that are oh, we're gonna make this smart character. How are we gonna do it? Oh, let's just do this thing where they go, all part of my plan, and don't explain it. That's my biggest pet peeve in media, period. I think that's why I hated The Boys season 4. I think that's why I didn't like it, because of Sister's Sake. I'm not even gonna get into The Boys season 4. That's a different topic. But yeah, as much negatives I have, the positives outweigh it so much more. I could go on about nitpicking the manga oh, I think Ichigo is a bit of a stale protagonist sometimes. I think he's a bit basic. There's a lot of times where Ichigo will literally be dead, like he actually died, and someone will just go, Ichigo, help me! And then he'll just like come back up to life. Like, like what are we doing? Like, that's actually the craziest Deus Ex Machina I've ever fucking seen in my... I don't even know if that's the right term either. It's like the biggest convenience I've ever seen in my entire life. But I do want to say a lot of characters in box set 2 were improved upon, especially Orihime. And I'm not pissed. I get it, but a lot of people for some reason hate Orihime in the arc Hueco Mundo. What I'm talking about. I love Orihime in Hueco Mundo. Are you kidding me? I love Orihime in Hueco Mundo. I love how she starts off as feeling very inadequate. I love how she starts off as feeling this feeling of everyone getting ahead of her having no power, her just not feeling special and just feeling left behind. And as soon as she gains a little bit confidence that her powers can actually help people and save people, she gets captured by the villains and has this really great conflict, this mental conflict on whether she helps the villains or doesn't help the villains and risks her friends and her own life. I love that so much. And I love at the end the way she reacts to Ichigo. She's not jumping up and cheer. She's not, cheering and joyous. It's, oh, he's here to save me. He's here to save me. I love that she's worried and she's almost scared that Ichigo is seeing her because of how much she's helped the villains. And I love how Ukihara is like this monster side of Ichigo and Orihime is like this humanity side of Ichigo, and they're like the two different spectrums, and Ichigo has to give up a lot of his humanity to save his friends, and to give up your life to save your friends is the most humane thing to do. And I love the message at the end of box set 2 where it's you can give up everything for your friends no matter like what you do, like you give up everything for your friends and you'll still be you. I love that so much. But there's a couple problems that Bleach has that I just can't overlook. Like literally, final thing I'll say, there was literally a fight it was literally a fat guy facing another fat guy, and the fight was, I'm not fat, you're fat. And the other guy goes, I'm not fat, you have a thyroid issue. And then the other guy like fucking turns into an elephant, and then the other guy goes, ha, you thought I was fat? I'm actually not fat. Don't judge people by their appearances. Why is this the worst fight I've ever read? That was actually it only is like for 2 chapters, like it's nothing, but it was so appalling. It was genuinely awful. There are like a lot of fights in box set 2 that just don't feel necessary at all. Like there's literally, I remember at like the beginning of Hueco Mundo, all the characters fight, these other like mini Arancars that aren't very important just to show off their powers, and it's treated like a big fight. Like just show off how powerful they are and be done. I'm good. Okay, that's gonna be it for the review. Again, I love Bleach. If anything, I'll probably give it an 8 or 9 out of 10. I thought it was incredible. There's so many elements that I really, really loved. There's so many things that I just couldn't deal with. Like, there's no way, like, especially because I've heard that Soul Society is kind of the peak of Bleach. If Soul Society was the only, like, if it ended as Soul Society, I would have gave Bleach probably like a 9 out of 10. Maybe, I'm not giving it a 10 out of 10, but maybe I would have if I was, like, feeling generous. Maybe a high 9. Because the early arc, like the little slice of life thing, I did not care for. But I think it is brought down a little bit. I still think it's incredible. I think it's brought down a little bit by the Hueco Mundo arc / Arankar arc. I don't even know what you would classify that as, but just, that arc. Okay, and that is the end of the video. If you made it to the end, please drop down a tree emoji so I know you made it to the end. Put a tree emoji in the fucking comments. Also, if you want to check it out, I have a Twitter, my anime list, in the description. Again, if you want a review like this of any manga, I don't even have to own it. Any manga, manhwa, comic, doesn't matter. Give me some money and I'll do it. Bye.